And Michelle, we just want to remind you to put your, to hit record. You are recording. Okay, wonderful. Then we're all set. Go ahead, Michelle.
Okay, can everyone hear me fine? Hope so. My name is Michelle Skinner, and I will be talking about preserving and sharing local history through digitization. And before I start, I've hit record, so hopefully everyone can hear me and all of the technical issues have been solved. And I'd like to recognize our founding partner, the San Jose State University School of Information, who have very generously put on this conference. And to begin, I will introduce myself and where I work. I work at the Chickasha Public Library, located in Chickasha, Oklahoma, middle of the USA, where I am a library assistant, genealogist, and resident history lover and information quest enthusiast. Today we'll be talking about one of my favorite library-related subjects, which is how this library is using digitization to preserve original documents, as well as how to share those documents, as well as local history, and make it accessible to the public. I will preface this by saying I'm not an expert, and in fact, I am still learning many of the basics of preservation, but it is something I absolutely love and feel passionate about. So I actually attended 2 workshops earlier this week. So my brain is very full of ideas and very full of new knowledge. And if I get something wrong today, then it will just be another learning experience. So the genesis of this digitization and preservation frenzy that I'm currently on predates COVID, although it has also become a way to share information and to make it more accessible during COVID. This all started when, during 2019, I wrote a book about the history of this library, and that project was like catnip for me. And for several months, I was allotted some of my work time, several hours, about 3 or 4 hours per week to spend finding treasures and handwritten documents and photos and newspaper clippings and other treasures that were in dusty back rooms and storage boxes and little wooden drawers. And this is the most fun I've ever had. And this is way outside my job description because my job is basically circulation and circulation adjacent, that kind of stuff. So, but my boss lets me do things outside of my job description that I just really love and feel passionate about. So I'm lucky to be able to do that. And so for several months, I had lots and lots of fun with all of these amazing and valuable primary sources as I pieced together puzzles of the past, and I researched, and I was able to take the original sources and to synthesize them and to create a book that was about 115 years of the library's history. And before I started writing and researching this project, I had no idea that these documents existed. They were in a back storage room in boxes and had somehow, some of them had survived over 100 years. And I was able to look at them and I transcribed some of them, and it was just wonderful. And I was completely blown away by how they had managed to survive 2 separate library buildings on the same site. And somehow there were just these pieces of paper in little drawers or in boxes, and they're still here. So I thought that was so amazing to me because I love documents. And at the same time, the Chickasha Public Library also has a collection of genealogy and local history reference materials as part of its collection. And I'm in the process of cataloging and maintaining that part of the collection, which is one of my other favorite things. And I have a lot of favorite things. And there are also local newspaper records on microfilm. And before COVID, people would occasionally come into the library specifically to research their family or local history by using these materials within the library. Then, as we all know, in March 2020, COVID arrived and stopped in-person library visits for several months while we served people curbside and digitally and with virtual programs. And it was that whole learning curve. And as we all learned how to keep serving the public, but in-person visits were not possible for a few months. So that was one area that it had gotten a little bit, was a little bit harder to figure out how to get this information to people. And at the same time, the microfilm machine stopped working, and it is prohibitively expensive to maintain the software. And the newspaper records were only available in microfilm. And all of this led to the current effort to preserve and digitize the primary source documents so that they can be accessible to as many people as possible, especially during COVID and also after COVID, because I think that this information, hopefully it will become permanent and everyone will have it forever, and it would be lovely. So this digitization effort, which is still in the beginning stages, is focusing mainly on the history of this library and in the rural community of Grady County, Oklahoma that it serves. These document categories of newspapers, yearbooks, and library history documents are those that are primary sources that are very unique to this community, because those are the ones where people would be likely to search for them at this library, and these are the documents that talk about this specific history and that aren't easily found elsewhere. And the kinds that if something happened to them and they were destroyed, they're not easily replaceable. So this is very, very local, very specialized information that I think that it very much needs to be preserved, and as quickly as possible, just because of the irreplaceable nature of this information. So this includes newspaper records on microfilm, and that's for several reasons. Because of the microfilm machine is not working, and some of the microfilm images are not the greatest quality, and sometimes it can deteriorate or be vulnerable to disasters. Yearbooks from schools within the county this library serves. Photographs, letters, library history documents are irreplaceable, and the danger is that their information would become lost. So the image on this slide is actually an amazing photograph that was taken at the library's opening when it was the Carnegie Library on March 23rd, 1905. So there are two main reasons for digitization. The first one is preserving original documents. Preservation helps to protect the original documents, and it also provides an additional format for the information, which greatly increases the likelihood that the information will be preserved even if something were to happen to the original. And as I mentioned a moment ago, before the digitization began, these documents were located on microfilm in physical books or on dusty boxes in a back storage room. None of these formats are conducive to long-term preservation. Also, microfilm records can deteriorate and they can be damaged, lost, or destroyed. Same with physical items. They can be damaged by page turning or just lost by being shelved, or just anything that can happen in the library. And then digitization allows these original documents, as well as everything from the library's history, like 100 years of library board meeting records and all of the newspaper clippings from the programs in the 1970s, and all these things I found to be safely kept in archive boxes, which will greatly minimize the threat of damage or exposure. The other big reason for digitization is to eliminate barriers to access. This is something I feel very passionately about because I love information and I love making information accessible because I think it makes the world a better place. There are several access barriers that can be either alleviated or eliminated completely by digitizing records. A few of these are the microfilm access that relies on a working microfilm machine, which can be expensive to purchase and maintain. Also, microfilm searching requires a lot of time and eyesight that many people do not have. If you've ever looked at a microfilm machine and tried to look up an obituary, especially if you are the staff member with a visual impairment, and it can be a little bit difficult and daunting, and getting images clear enough to read is an issue with microfilm. And especially as the quality of microfilm rolls can vary. Some can be excellent and very clear, some can be completely just barely readable, and anywhere in between. Also, viewing any physical reference material requires a geographic proximity that allows for visiting this specific library in person. And COVID has increased the necessity for digital programs as well as increased informational access in a greater variety of formats. So before digitization, people had to come physically be able to visit the library or send an email request to have a staff member look something up. So the possibility of browsing was not really there. for things like newspaper records. And so that was something that needed to happen. And then also hosting documents online without paywalls or requiring individual subscriptions to websites. This is something that I love because, again, I love information, I love sharing it, and I think that it should all be free just because requiring payment to access something that should be for the public is, I just don't, I'm do a lot of genealogy research, so I love it when there are no paywalls. So, and that vastly increases the number of people who access the information. So digitization can be very expensive. So finding sources of funding is essential for any large-scale project. The largest single collection being digitized at this library right now is newspapers on microfilm. Last fall, the Chickasha Public Library was awarded the Oklahoma Heritage Preservation Grant in the amount of $20,000 to digitize Chickasha newspapers from 1923 to 2018. The ones before 1923 were already hosted on a wonderful website called the Gateway to Oklahoma History, and then this will complete the collection. We also have a very generous Friends of the Library group who very enthusiastically contributed. They contributed $3,700 towards this newspaper digitization effort, and that is, plus the grant is what is allowing us to do that. And also, as a personal side, that was the first grant proposal I've ever written, so I was very excited when we got it, and I did a happy dance at work. And the other possibilities for sources of funding is depending on the type of material being digitized and the community. It may be possible to collaborate with other organizations or museums, historical societies. I think a lot of it is very community specific and sometimes document specific. So I think there are a lot of possibilities that can be dictated just by what information do you have and in what format it's in and what does your community need to know. And so in making documents accessible, it is an essential component of public information because this is information that should be readily available and that we want to share as much as possible because it is about people in the community in the past and how it affects the present. And so I found 2 websites that collect and preserve digital information specifically about Oklahoma that can be accessed for free. The first one is the Images of Oklahoma. That is a website where libraries and other organizations submit their digitized images, and that is where some of the yearbooks have already been hosted. And what that does is the very early Chickasha High School yearbooks from 1911 and 1912, they can be in archive boxes while people can examine each page individually through Images of Oklahoma. So I put up a link on the genealogy page of the library's website of just linking to every single yearbook that's on there of what school it is and what year, so that anyone who wants to see their old yearbook picture from 1973, or they want to see when their grandmother attended the Oklahoma College for Women, then that is all available for them to do that. And then the original documents are saved and preserved. So there are things to consider about it. Oh, and the other is the Gateway to Oklahoma History, which I already mentioned, as that will have the complete newspaper collection. And then the things to consider are copyright, getting permission from relevant entities for publication, and identifying metadata for each item or collection so that you can understand it as well as everyone else can understand it. And before I turned in the grant application, I worked with my director in getting a lot of the numerical information and the things that the finances that I don't really have access to in my getting that as far as the learning process. And then also getting permission from the newspaper to publish it and to publish the newspapers and to make them available on a website. And so there's a letter included in the grant proposal from the newspaper publisher saying, we agree that this will be allowed and we are fine with this. So besides these 2 websites, there are a few other possibilities for access, including digital collections, library website, PDF documents, flash drives, historic displays, basically whichever format best preserves and shares that specific information. And as I am very quickly learning, it can vary a lot by information type, by format, by how best to preserve and share the information. And it's not always a straightforward process. It's just kind of a learning curve. So I am currently on that learning curve. It's a very fun one. So to conclude this information, digitization is something that is unique to each institution and can be customized to fit a specific library or community's history or collection. There are very specific opportunities and specific limitations. For example, I'm at a small public library, and it's going to have many different considerations than maybe a large archive or a museum or a large university or even a tiny school library. Or everyone's going to be slightly different. So that can be reflected in policies and planning and staffing and so many different things. So what I'm learning is that it's very customizable, unique. So it's like this little adventure that I'm going on and learning so much every day. And the process I've described here is based on my specific experience at a municipal public libraries. Its specific items it has generated through its unique history of 115 years, or by donations from community members. And that will also dictate some of the uniqueness, because each community has individuals who will donate items to the library, and sometimes those can be very interesting. And I've gotten a few very great things coming through donations, because little ephemeral documents about what the residents of Grady County might have been doing 50 years ago. And that's something that when those documents were created, they might not have been created to last forever. And they might not have been thinking someone 50 years from now really wants to look at this. But because they provide insights into the everyday life of local history, I think that it gives such a valuable peek into the past. It can answer historical questions like, why did people believe a certain way about specific events? Who is telling the historical narrative? Who is being left out of the historical narrative? Who has the power? Who does not? And what was the historical narrative? And especially things like the newspapers, where one of the things I wrote in the grant proposal was specifically about, this is what these rural residents saw every day. And this was the connection to the world as most people knew it. And so it will really help answer some of these questions about, why were things like this? How does the past affect the present? How have events been told throughout history? And what was emphasized, what was left out, who is telling the story and why? And a lot of these things, if you go back to the primary sources, that is where you're going to find some of the answers about, especially in small rural communities, because the library and its newspapers and magazines were how many people experienced the world. So preserving and sharing information, it is always an ongoing process. As I mentioned, I attended 2 online workshops earlier this week, and I'm still trying to synthesize everything I learned so that I can at some point apply the new information to what I'm already doing and to be better equipped to understand what to do for the future. And understanding the opportunities and limitations in my immediate environment will help guide the next steps, while larger events such as COVID have underscored the necessity of reaching beyond physical barriers for information sharing. I'm hoping this continues past COVID, because there are researchers who could be from anywhere in the world who maybe want to know about their family history or something about that happened in this local community. And they might not have the geographic proximity required to visit this library in person. They might not have the time to go through microfilm records, and putting them online greatly increases the access and allows anyone to be able to connect those records with others and to find historical patterns and to make connections with different communities and different historical events and how they relate to current events. And all of these wonderful, exciting things that I did a lot of while writing the library history book, and I just completely fell in love with the process because it is amazing and wonderful, and I just love it so much. So the wonderful document that you see on the right of this slide is the record of the first meeting of the Carnegie Library Committee in April 1904, where volunteers from the newly incorporated community of Chickasha decided how to disperse of grant funds from Andrew Carnegie to build the city library. This is one of the documents I found in a small wooden drawer just tucked away, and it was my favorite thing ever. It still is. I just made a simple PDF scan of it, and I have it saved right now in several formats, and the original is hanging on the wall. But this is one of those documents that I think it's so incredible that it has survived this long, and it should survive forever because it's just, it blows me away for so many reasons. This shows the very beginning of a small city library that has existed for 116 years now. So to customize this process for other libraries and other types of libraries, other types of communities, basically every library has its own unique set of documents, whether they be local history, genealogy, photographs, or just oddball ephemeral documents. And you can ask yourself, what documents does your library have? What formats are best for preserving your specific local history with the specific community that the library serves? And they might be different ways for different kinds of documents and for different types of history, because I might find something else interesting tomorrow and tucked away in a back storage room, and then I might have a completely new storage mystery to figure out. And also, people from other places who want to learn about your community, such as genealogists or historians or researchers, or someone writing about the library's history, or someone who just really wants to learn about a specific place they've never been before. Digitizing allows them to look online and to find some of those primary source documents, because that goes back to what is the most essential source, the very first source of information before it's been filtered by other secondary sources and different authors. And finally, there's my last point, which is one of my favorite points, and my reason for librarying is, which a word I just made up, that since libraries are for everyone, it makes sense that library and community should be shared with everyone. And that, to me, I think that involves all history of all the people who have been represented in the past, people who have been less represented in the past. I think that everyone's voice should be heard. And I think history, and it should reflect the community, and it should reflect all of the diversity, and it should reflect everyone. And so I think that libraries can kind of start to create and document that history so that it's not lost, and so that the entire community can say, this is where we were and this is where we're going, and this is how we can learn from mistakes and be better in the future. And hopefully it will be a wonderful tool for so many different reasons. And so that is all of the information I have for today. So I guess I'll stop share. So I don't know.
And I wanted to encourage anyone who had a question to go ahead and turn on your mic or to place it into chat.
Okay.
And I know that several people, Michelle, asked if it was possible to get a copy of your slides.
Yes, I have it on my slides are on my Google Drive, so I could see what would be the best way to share them. I could email them to individual people, or I don't know if there's a place I could host them.
Well, I'm wondering if it wouldn't be easier if you don't mind sharing your
oh, I can share the link.
Oh,
Let me.
There you go.
Let me get out of full screen, and there should be a shareable link. Share to anyone with a link. Copy link. Okay, so I'm going to put it in chat. And let me know if this works or not. and I will try to get to a few of the questions. And
And
are all the questions in chat?
some of the questions, most people have just been commenting about, just things as you went along. Darlita asked, what's the best scanner to use for digitizing? And anybody can share with that as well if, an add-on to Michelle.
The short answer is I guess what you can afford, because I know that there are some and they're very expensive, but for most of the documents, it's the main thing for me has been preserving it. And so I just use the regular library scanner, and it might be less detailed than a specialized scanner, and we might be able to get a specialized scanner at some point, but so much of it depends on finances and things that are just completely over out of my control. So I'm actually not sure. That's something I'm going to need to do more research on. And I know that money is a big issue with scanners. And I found the regular library scanner to be at least adequate for some of the very old documents that I thought need a digital record before they fall apart.
And people are just offering some of what they use in their archives. When Candace said Epson 10,000. I think I got the numbers right. And then someone also, I think we're running out of time, but someone wondered about reading out loud the Carnegie letter. Have you digitized that anywhere online, Michelle?
The Carnegie letter, I actually transcribed it as an appendix at the end of the library history book.
Okay.
I believe I did. Yes, the very first meeting of the Carnegie Library Committee, I transcribed it as an appendix. And
is that available online anywhere?
It is not at this point because the book was published by the library. So I'm trying to think of where I have it online. I could probably, because I have it on my work computer because it's in the book document itself. And so you could either interlibrary loan the book, or else I can try to think if there's a way to host that. If I can get it on my Google Drive, which it would have to be tomorrow because I don't have access to my work computer right now. But I'll try to think about that. If someone has something that they would like to, if they would like to receive it and they want to email me, and I can email them a copy when I'm able to do a copy paste on my work computer because I have it written out.
Wonderful. I don't know if you shared your email.
I can put my email address in chat.
Okay, great. Thank you. And while that's going on, is there a particular format that is preferred for archival, saving, TIFF, JPEG?
I have been saving in PDF, and then I had a workshop the one Tuesday. Someone said that TIFF was better for images. So what I did was I took one document and I saved it in JPEG, TIFF, and PDF, because I thought I'll just save them in all the formats. And one is bound to be at least relatively stable for the time being, because after it's scanned, then I can just easily save it here, there, and everywhere. And that's what I'm doing right now. And then if I learn something conclusively that one is better than the other, then I can probably fix it then. But I figure right now, since I'm just in the organizational settings, the more formats, the better.
Some people have asked about watermarks and storage problems, and if PDFs are more searchable, like let's say a book or something. Someone put in their file format recommendation to the Library of Congress. Thank you.
Oh, neat.
Jack. Very nice.
Okay, yeah, that'll be great, because I figure I haven't run into storage problems yet. So I just have on one of my staff folders, I just have a folder called digitized images, and then I have a spreadsheet going on where I have all of the metadata, as well as here are all the formats that this one image is saved in, and here's a description of the image, here's a subject. Basically, if it were in a digital collection, all the metadata where it would make sense to someone who may not have seen it before. And I'm doing this so that I can figure out what I have, where is it, what is it, why is it, how is it, and where do I go from here. I started that 2 days ago, and so I've started with some of the things that I have, some of the documents that are in a history display right now, and then I'm eventually going to, once I get certain categories, I'm going to duplicate them on flash drives and put them in various places, and hopefully host them on Images of Oklahoma and the Gateway and different places, so that they'll be in different formats in all different places, so that if something happens to one of them, I'll have through. And to be honest, I've emailed all of these to myself multiple times. So half of my library email right now is things that say no subject, which are actually just me emailing scanned images to myself. And side note, it's also a very good idea to make sure you write things in the subject line so that it doesn't just say no subject for 100 emails in a row. I learned that the hard way, but I just got overexcited. And so, but anyway, the main thing is multiple formats and multiple locations is where I'm starting. And that way, if something better comes up, if I learned, that way I have the information, because that's the most important thing, is having it to where it can be shared and preserved. And then from there, I'll just go from there. And then as I learn new and amazing things, then I will incorporate those into what I'm already doing. And so if anyone would like to email me with fantastic words of wisdom, because I browsed through a little bit of the chat and I've seen lots of very knowledgeable looking people. So anyone with words of wisdom on any of this who would like to give me any advice or information, that would be great, because I'm learning lots about this and it's a lot of fun.
Okay, great. Thank you, Michelle. And so everybody, if you need to go to another session, I'm sure a lot of people have already left, but go on, take care. Thank Michelle. And
thank you, it was fun. I love sharing about this.
Okay, I'm going to stop the recording.
Okay.